December 8th, 2025, just before midnight. An earthquake so fierce that residents of Hachinohe had to crawl to survive. As alarms blared and more than 100,000 people fled the northern coast. Within minutes, Japan faced not just a tsunami warning, but its first ever government alert that the real disaster, the big one, could follow within days. Why did experts issue this unprecedented megaquake warning? And could the next week reshape everything Japan thought it understood about seismic safety? The answers start here. At 11:15 p.m., the earth beneath Hachinohe began to convulse. For more than 30 seconds, the shaking was relentless, too violent for anyone to stand. In living rooms and bedrooms, people were thrown to the floor. Dishes crashed from shelves. Heavy furniture slid across tatami mats. The walls groaned and windows rattled as the ground heaved, each jolt sharper than the last. In the darkness, the only light came from the harsh glow of smartphone screens. Suddenly, alarms erupted, shrill synchronized warnings blaring from every device. A piercing chime echoed from phones, radios, and public speakers, cutting through the confusion. Some residents tried to reach doorways or duck under tables, but the force pinned them down. Crawling was the only option. One Hachinohe resident later said that she could not even get to her shoes. The floor felt like a ship in a storm. All she could do was crawl and wait for it to stop. Outside, car alarms added to the din. Power flickered in some neighborhoods, plunging streets into darkness. Even far from the epicenter, in places like Oirase and Mutsu, the tremors knocked over televisions and sent books tumbling from shelves. In Tokyo, nearly 400 miles away, high-rise buildings swayed, and the alarms kept ringing. For many in northern Japan, the memory of 2011 returned in a rush. The same fear, the same helplessness. But this time, the alerts came faster. Within moments, tens of thousands knew that something massive had struck offshore, and this was only the beginning. Within minutes of the shaking, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami warning for the Pacific coasts of Aomori, Iwate, and Hokkaido. The alert was clear. Waves up to 3 meters could strike. Sirens wailed and loudspeakers crackled to life as officials urged residents to head for higher ground. Municipal offices activated emergency protocols, sending evacuation orders to more than 100,000 people in low-lying areas. Smartphones buzzed with the official J alert, repeating the warning in sharp, urgent tones. In coastal towns, families grabbed go-bags and flashlights, moving quickly through darkened streets. Schools, gymnasiums, and community centers opened their doors as designated shelters. Buses lined up at evacuation points, ready to transport those without cars. Police and volunteer fire brigades directed traffic away from the waterfront, waving people through intersections as lines of headlights snaked toward the hills. On the national stage, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center sent out bulletins across the region, warning that hazardous waves could reach coasts within 1,000 kilometers of the epicenter. Fishing ports and industrial docks along the Sanriku coast fell silent, their workers already gone. In Hachinohe, a steady stream of evacuees climbed the slope behind the local elementary school, some still in pajamas, clutching blankets and radios. The memory of 2011 was never far from mind. Every order, every alarm, every hurried step was shaped by the lessons of disaster. Through the night, the evacuation continued, coordinated and relentless, as communities braced for the sea's next move. Along the Sanriku coast, the first signs of the tsunami arrived not as towering waves, but as a steady, measured rise. At Kuji Port in Iwate Prefecture, tide gauges recorded a maximum wave height of 70 centimeters. In Urakawa and Mutsu Ogawara, the water climbed to about 50 centimeters. These readings, logged by port officials and relayed in real time to the Japan Meteorological Agency, became the reference points for the night's threat. The numbers might seem modest, But even a half-meter surge can send powerful currents sweeping through harbors, snapping mooring lines and tossing small boats against the docks. Coastal managers in Iwate later described the swirling water as deceptively forceful, enough to overturn fishing vessels and flood low-lying piers. The evacuation of more than 90,000 people was not an overreaction, but a direct response to the hard data streaming in from tide stations up and down the coast. While the sea did not breach seawalls or inundate inland neighborhoods, the evidence from the gauges confirmed the warnings. The ocean had moved, and the risk was real. Through the early hours, officials tracked each pulse and eddy, knowing that the difference between a minor surge and disaster is sometimes just a matter of meters and minutes. At street level, the earthquake's toll became clear as the first reports filtered in. In homes and businesses across Aomori and Hokkaido, injuries mounted, with at least 51 people hurt, one of them seriously. Most suffered cuts, bruises, or broken bones from falling shelves, toppling bookcases, and shattered glass. In Hachinohe, 12 people were treated for injuries after being struck by household items or tripping as they tried to crawl to safety. In Tohoku Town, a section of road collapsed without warning, leaving a gaping hole that swallowed a car. The driver escaped with minor injuries, but the scene underscored how even familiar routes could turn treacherous in the aftermath of violent shaking. Aomori City firefighters battled two small blazes sparked by damaged gas lines or electrical faults. Both fires were contained quickly, but the specter of urban fire, a nightmare in past disasters, remained ever present. Power outages swept through coastal neighborhoods, with around 800 homes plunged into darkness at the peak. For many, the loss of electricity compounded the confusion, leaving families to navigate their homes by flashlight amid overturned furniture and scattered belongings. An emergency management expert later explained, "Japan's strict building codes save lives, but the real danger often comes from within, such as unsecured furniture, loose objects, and aging infrastructure." The night's injuries and disruptions served as a stark reminder. Resilience is measured not just by towering seawalls, but by the everyday decisions made inside each home. Japan's meteorological agency moved quickly after the shaking subsided, issuing an alert that drew national attention for its unprecedented message. For the first time, officials warned of 1% chance that an even larger earthquake, magnitude 8 or greater, could strike the same region within the next week. The advisory covered 182 municipalities, stretching from Hokkaido to Miyagi, placing millions of people on heightened watch. While 1% sounds remote, seismologists explained that in a country as densely populated and tectonically restless as Japan, even a small increase in probability carries enormous consequences. The warning was not based on guesswork, but on statistical models and lessons from the past. In 2011, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake struck off Sanriku 2 days before the catastrophic magnitude 9.0 main shock. 20,000 lives were lost in that disaster, most to the tsunami that followed. The parallels were impossible to ignore. A major offshore quake followed by a brief window of elevated risk. This time, the agency's models showed that the December 2025 event had shifted stress along the plate boundary, making a larger rupture more likely, if still unlikely. A senior agency seismologist explained that even a 1% risk, when the outcome is a megaquake, is enough to warrant full vigilance. They said our job is not to predict the future, but to give people the facts they need to stay safe. Inspections began at Japan's nuclear power plants within minutes of the quake. At Fukushima Daiichi, Higashidori, and Onagawa, plant operators and the Nuclear Regulation Authority confirmed all reactors and cooling systems were operating normally. Emergency teams checked water levels, backup generators, and radiation monitors. No abnormalities were found. The International Atomic Energy Agency was notified and began remote monitoring, echoing the heightened vigilance that has defined nuclear oversight since 2011. A spokesperson at Higashidori said they activated their emergency protocols immediately, and that every system worked as designed. While engineers checked reactors, the central government moved to coordinate the broader response. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida convened an emergency task force just after midnight, bringing together ministers, defense officials, and disaster managers. Orders went out for the self-defense forces to deploy. 18 helicopters lifted off from northern bases, flying over Aomori, Iwate, and Hokkaido to survey damage and support local authorities. On the ground, shelters opened across 182 municipalities. At Hachinohe Air Base, nearly 480 residents spent the night, while community centers and schools took in thousands more. Transportation networks felt the strain. About 200 travelers were stranded overnight at New Chitos Airport after flights were suspended for safety checks. Rail services paused for inspections, and roads along the coast closed temporarily for tsunami evacuation. By morning, most lines and highways reopened as checks confirmed their safety. Transportation remained a critical focus as officials worked to restore normal movement and delivery of aid. Even as the immediate crisis eased, aftershocks continued. At dawn, a magnitude 6.6 tremor rattled the region, prompting another round of checks but causing no new damage. Throughout, government briefings emphasized vigilance. The risk of a larger event remained, and every system, nuclear, logistical, and emergency, would stay on alert. Japan faces 1,500 earthquakes each year, and anyone could shift the balance. Every alert now carries the weight of the lessons of 2011 and of the warning from 2025. Preparedness is the only certainty in a world where the next fault line is always waiting. How ready are we when the sirens sound again?